host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. All right. Happy Love Day, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a great Valentine's Day. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. Yes, it is Valentine's Day. I hope you're having a good one. I was just thinking about this earlier, about some of the songs that I think are great for Valentine's Day. Like some of those love songs. It doesn't necessarily have to be a slow song. So I thought of one that anyone can use, regardless if you have a significant other or not. And that's the Love Train song. People all over the world, join in, start a love train, a love train. That song, anyone can sing that song. It doesn't matter if you're single. It doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or not. That song can fit everybody, folks. So happy Valentine's Day. So glad you guys could hang out with me tonight. I'm actually going to celebrate Valentine's, or at least have Valentine's dinner tomorrow, not today. Today was kind of hectic and crazy. We got a lot going on, but just because it's Valentine's Day doesn't mean we don't have a theme tonight, and it's not Valentine's. Tonight's theme is looks can be deceiving. Ooh, snap. That's right. Looks can be deceiving. What are we going to talk about? Let's go ahead and give shout outs to everyone in the chat first. And feel free to share. What is your favorite love song for Valentine's Day? Greetings, Larez. Hi, Sabby, Eric, Corey, and RBN fam. U.S. empire always threatens first, will never learn. Trump threatening Brics is more reason for other countries to join. They can't even hear themselves hit the like. That's right. It's true. It basically just tells other countries, oh, maybe I should be a part of this. You know what I mean? Shout out to Lynn Jason. U.S. empire is in real trouble, losing in Ukraine, losing the propaganda war in Israel, losing the AI war against China, and very close to a civil war. I think Lynn has a really good point here. Greetings, Larry. There is no way the brother is a sellout. No way. Oh, yes, even. We will get into it tonight. Wait for it, fam. Shout out to Adonia. Also, a note for any civilian federal workers, any network group you are a part of at work on work premises can be considered DEI. Oh, this is interesting. So be a paid member of the union and remove yourself from groups. That's a good point there, Adonia. I didn't think about that. I know when I was working at like the different universities, there were different like work groups. Like there was a women's group. There was was it the Black Employees Group? It wasn't called the Black Employees Group, but like there was a women's group, and then it was called the Diversity Group, but it was mainly Black people that were in the group. So it wasn't it. Yeah, there are all those different like organizations at jobs. I didn't think about that, but that's a really good point. M1083A says, I did not know that. Neither did I. Greetings Beyond Ebony says, Hakeem Jeffries is a joke. Shout out to Hannah says, Trump is losing his mind. Greetings Kimi says, good evening, fam. Hello to Eric. And of course, hello to the hostess with the mostest. What's up, Kimi? Greetings Mark says, Sabby. Shout out to Max says, ready for the storm this weekend. I am not, but I don't have too much planned this weekend, but I'm not. We just had a snowstorm, so I'm just kind of like, give us a minute. Greetings, Abu says, Assalamu alaikum. What's up, Abu? Shout out to Mike says, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Greetings, Tim, though. Hakeem is a whole clown. What can we do? He says, feckless Dem Party SMH. Stop voting for these people who aren't doing shit for y'all. Please vote third party and tear all this down. Happy Valentine's Day, Sabby. Happy Valentine's Day to you, too. Greetings, Palestine has a right to defend against occupation. Is this a live or a premiere? This is live. This is live. And it should say live like on YouTube. So that's how you know the difference. Like, yeah. Greetings, Miranda. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Shout out to Eric says Friday rockin'. Here we go. Greetings, Hob. USS Truman collided with container ship. Weren't broadcasting their position. I wonder if so they have an excuse to do major repairs after taking damage from Yemen that they haven't reported. I don't know. That's interesting. Greetings, Otto says, yo, happy Valentine's Day, mother lovers. Shout out to Mary Plot, who is dancing away. Greetings, all one same, says, make it a great day, everyone. Shout out to Crom, says, happy Valentine's Day, Sabby. To all of you guys. Greetings, Obed says, hello from the Netherlands. What is up, international fam? Greetings, Skylar. Raise your hand if you're here to watch Hakeem Jeffries get aired the fuck out. Oh, wait for it. That's going to be a good one. You might find out some things that you did not know. Greetings, Leroy. I'm so sick of the establishment telling Black Americans what they're going to do with Black American reparations. I remember seeing a story in Virginia where they wanted to rename some crap. Crazy. Yeah, we'll get into that. Shout out to Cloudness says Sabby Sabs in the building in 7 days until it's my birthday and Pisces season is almost upon us. Peace, fam, be one. Well, welcome all. Welcome. All right. I want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for holding the lights on around me, folks. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also a group called Sabsters. I don't know. Maybe you've heard of them. Yeah, they're doing the damn thing. Don't forget about those snazzy Sabbies. Of course, they are there as well. That's right. I see the Pisces things in the chat. Yes, I am a Pisces. I'll tell you something about Pisces in a minute. And shout out to members. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate all of your support. You can see all of their names here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Kat Nyambi. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Something about Pisces. We're interesting people in the sense that we can flip on a dime, right? Cloudness knows. Those of us that are Pisces, we tend to be a little bit more in our feelings. So when we're happy, we're really, really happy. And we're typically nice people. But if you piss us off, beware. You never want to see that side of a Pisces. You don't want to see that side. Okay, guys. Again, tonight's theme is looks can be deceiving. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail there, ladies and gentlemen, and see if you can figure out what is deceiving about tonight's stories. Tonight, we are discussing Chris Cuomo warns Democrats. Wait till you see what Chris Cuomo says, right? We will not be deceived, especially with Chris. We're also discussing, I am doing another deep dive. I haven't done one since Gloria Steinem. This time, the deep dive is about Hakeem Jeffries. So tonight, exposing Hakeem Jeffries. If you think you know, you have no idea. That was from one of those MTV shows back in the day. It's like, you think you know, you have no idea. We're also going to discuss Trump threatens Brics as Modi visits. So both of these things happening at the same time is very interesting. You can see the look on Trump's face there. He's like, and Modi is such a sucker. I'll get into all of that, fam. We're also going to discuss, this story is crazy, and I really do not want people to be deceived here. This fake reparations scam that is being done by Ayanna Pressley and Summer Lee, I'm going to break all that down tonight and tell you what this really is about, ladies and gentlemen, because I don't want people to assume things are reparations that are not reparations. So we got to be very clear about that here. And I have to let people know what this is really about. And we also have a bonus story about a couple in Georgia. And I want to talk about this story for a number of reasons, but because it could happen to you. If it happened to them, it can happen to you. And I think it's going to bring up the question of whether or not we actually own what we think we own. So, yeah. Quite a bit to discuss tonight. Again, the theme is looks can be deceiving. If you haven't already done so, ladies and gentlemen, start us off right by smashing that like. Hey. All right. And we are going to go ahead and dive into our first story. Let's get started with that bonus story. So I think it is really important that you understand there's a difference between what's right and what's wrong and what is the law. And that cannot be further from the truth with this particular story that I'm going to discuss. First, I want to start with the law. Let's start with the law and then get to the story so you'll understand where I'm going with this and what exactly is happening to this couple in Georgia. Let's talk about eminent domain. Eminent domain refers to the power of the government to take private property and convert it into public use, referred to as a taking. The Fifth Amendment provides that the government may only exercise this power if they provide just compensation to the property owners. Now, we need to ask the question, what is considered just compensation? A taking may be the actual seizure of the property by the government, or the taking may be in the form of regulatory taking, which occurs when the government restricts a person's use of their property to the point of it constituting a taking. So keep in mind that this is protected by the Fifth Amendment. Again, got to say that so you can see where we're going with this. Now, that's the law. Do I agree with the law? No, I don't. I think that once you own something, it should be yours. I don't think that the government or a corporation should be able to come in and take what you already own. But that is exactly what is happening to this couple in Georgia. And you guys have got to see this. Georgia family, they are fighting against a land seizure. Now, this couple, they have had this land in their family name for over 600 years. So the land has been passed down throughout the years, right? So obviously that's more than a lot of us, because a lot of us that are descendants of slavery, we just don't have that. We don't. A lot of us don't have land or didn't have land to pass down, but they did. Listen to what is about to happen to them.
Okay.
Driving across their nearly 600 acres
Yeah, you can see a lot of little trees over there. You see the tops of them.
never gets old for Blaine and Diane Smith. The history just as rich as the timber crops they've been farming.
We used to go down there. It's a special rock that we like to sit on.
Blaine's enslaved ancestors lived and worked on this Sparta land. Now, he and his wife own the very property. The family among the less than 2% of black farmers nationwide.
My father farmed this land almost all of his life. My grandfather farmed it most of his life. He bought it back in the 1920s. During that time, he raised cotton, corn, peas, all kinds of vegetables. But it's still in the Smith family. Not one piece of it has gotten away.
Until this September. State leaders decided parts of the Sparta land are no longer theirs.
It's my property. You don't.
Pause for a second. Thank you for the correction, Ms. Kiwi. 600 acres, not 600 years. I'm so sorry. They've had the land in the family since the 1920s. Thank you so much for that correction. All right, let's go back in.
Have the right to take
But a private company does have the right to take it, according to the unanimous vote from the Georgia Public Service Commission. The agency, comprised of 5 elected officials, oversees eminent domain. Eminent domain, the right of a government or its agent to appropriate private property for public use with payment of compensation. In Georgia, the process starts by first condemning the site. The Georgia PSC members agreed private company Sandersville Railroad could legally condemn 9 properties in Sparta, including...
Pause. So a railroad company has the right to condemn at least 9 properties in Sparta, Georgia. And this is according to the federal judge.
Including parts of the Smiths for the company's Hanson Spur project, a 4.5-mile spur connecting raw material producers to the CSX rail line in Hancock County, essentially hauling rocks that be used to build concrete. The company argues the train project will improve infrastructure. But
let's pause here and let's go back to that map. So basically what they are trying to do, this railroad company, Sandersonville Railroad, they are trying to build this railroad. If you follow the yellow line, you'll see this is the direction that they're trying to go in. And you can see the Smith family farm is right here. So this means that they're going to lose a portion of that land. But it also means something else. It also means that now there is going to be a railroad that goes through what was part of their property. And I want to be honest about something here as well. The reality is, if they ever wanted to sell that farm in the future, it may be difficult, because the reality is, folks, a lot of people don't want to live right next to a railroad. I know, I live next to train tracks. I lived in an apartment building many years ago with 3 roommates, and there was a train track right behind the building, and the train woke us up every night like clockwork. 3 o'clock in the morning, here comes that train. And a lot of people just don't want that. So that also makes me wonder if the property value would also decrease as well. Even the rest of the part that they would still legally own, it makes me wonder, would that make their property decrease in value? But the reality is, most people do not want to live right next to a damn railroad track.
Raw material producers to the CSX rail line in Hancock County, essentially hauling rocks that be used to build concrete. The company argues the train project will improve infrastructure, but the Smiths feel railroaded.
If you listen to the railroad folks, they say you're keeping your land. We're just taking a little piece of it. To me, we've got somebody who's coming through it like they are. They're devaluing it. They're defacing it. They're creating hazards through it.
They are just one of at least a dozen local eminent domain cases in recent years, from Atlanta to Newton County. Current statistics are few and fragmented, but Atlanta News First Investigates found nationwide data. A 2007 study revealed when eminent domain was used for private development, it most often impacted areas where more than half of the community was made up of people of color. Nearly half of the area's population sat below the poverty line.
So that part right there is really important, because most of these eminent domain areas are areas where, as they say here, people of color, but I would also add predominantly Black areas. So once again, what this means is that they would lose part of their wealth. And I have to ask this question, because if we're really thinking about it, because eminent domain still does exist and it is legal and apparently protected within the Fifth Amendment, do we really own what we think we own? Do we really own the land that we think that we own? Because if a corporation can come in and say, we need this part of your property to build such and such, and we'll just give you this compensation, Do we really own the land if part of it can be taken away? And if we don't really own the land, then technically that would still make us tenants. That's something we really need to start asking. We really need to think about. Do we really own the land just because it says we're the property owner if the government can give the clearance for a corporation to come in and take part of it away? What do we really own? And to go along with that, this is how people lose generational wealth. This isn't the first story with a similar situation where I've discussed this before. 2 years ago, I covered a story about a 92-year-old grandmother in South Carolina that was being sued by a real estate development company because they wanted to take her land to build luxury condos on the land. Similar situation with the Smiths, where the land had been in her family throughout generations, and they sued her. She wasn't suing them. They were suing her. They were stealing the land from that woman. Like, this is insane. These are some of the ways that Black families over generations have lost their wealth. I always mention the '08 housing crisis. That was a big part of it. But it's also issues like this.
In the city of Sparta, where the developers are building the railroad, census records show 51% of residents live in poverty, the median income at $22,000.
You know, we're here in a county that really needs new opportunities, new job growth, new tax base.
The railroad company president, Ben Tarbutton.
Have an annual impact of $1.5 million.
Dollars that could make sense for a struggling town. It's how the company has pitched the project to residents. However, Georgia law states economic development is not a justifiable reason to take property.
It really is not supposed to be factored into an eminent domain case.
Well, they go hand in hand. I talk about jobs because that's what really matters to folks.
Tarbutton says the train would only travel one round trip per day, 5 days a week during daylight hours, that it would not be a nuisance to landowners.
That doesn't, I'm sorry, but that doesn't matter. Like, the reality is it's their land, or is supposed to be their land. And whether or not you think it's going to be a nuisance or not, that's really besides the point. Imagine if I came to your house. You know, we'll bring up the Gaza situation in a second too, because I know someone mentioned that in the chat. That's a good question. Someone just said, do people in Gaza own the land that they have? That's a good point. But if I came to your house and I said, hey, that's a nice backyard you got there. I'm actually building, a development, and your backyard is kind of in the way. So I'm going to need part of that for this development. Oh, and by the way, it is really important for infrastructure. I can make whatever kind of case I want. And you lose part of your land. It happens. And it's been happening. And more people need to talk about this. I haven't seen too many, and we got to ask this question because, as much as people say that they're progressive and they care about progressive issues, I haven't seen white progressives cover this story. And I didn't see white progressives cover the story about the 92-year-old grandmother 2 years ago either. You know who I saw cover this story? Black people. Dana with the Data covered this story. And Dana with the Data is conservative. And she covered this story. Mark Lamont Hill covered this story. So I think we need to start asking some questions, because my whole thing is like, you want us to come out when you need us to help get the vote, but you don't want to talk about any of these issues that directly impact Black communities. You're nowhere to be found. But you want us to come out and vote for those politicians who are allowing these things to happen and aren't doing anything in those Black communities. Something to pay attention to.
They feel like you guys are robbing them of their family legacy, of their family land.
Well, I understand that. And it's the condemnation process is a last resort. We have had multiple conversations with the landowners.
While several other property owners made deals with the company, 3 families are holding out, including the Smiths, in part over fears if they give up land now, the company could take even more.
Would you guys come back and take more land?
Well, I don't know exactly who you're talking to, but everyone I've dealt with that's a landowner, we've had very constructive dialogue.
So would you take more land if you needed it?
No, we're very clear.
A claim the Smiths don't believe.
Because when they come and take that property, it's gone forever.
It's why the Institute for Justice now represents the families against the railroad.
The railroad's position is just that I'm a railroad. Obviously, I'm going to benefit you, and that's just not enough.
The attorney filed this appeal in Fulton County Superior Court, alleging the PSC improperly granted Sandersville's petition that the project is not economically feasible and may not be a legitimate public use.
What the railroad has shown is that this track, if it even comes about, is going to promote the profits and the cost reductions for a couple of private companies, and that's all.
The Institute for Justice is using this as a money-making venture for themselves.
My big question is, I'm reminded of East Palestine, Ohio. What happens if that train derails? You see this whole thing about, well, it's just a part of their land that we want to take and the train won't be a nuisance. What happened if the train derails? Trains derail in the U.S. all the time. I mean, the East Palestine one was a big story, but it happens more often than people realize. So if that train does derail, it could derail on the remaining part of their property. Then what? What if there's chemicals on the train when the train derails, just like East Palestine, Ohio? Now you got chemicals in the air in the neighborhood too, and then the people will be pushed out. No one should have their land taken away. Now, to the person who was mentioning this in the chat, they said, do the Palestinians own that land in Gaza? That's a good point. No. As much as we've talked about Gaza and the West Bank and about Israel stealing their land, I thought it was important to cover the story because I want you to realize it happens in the United States too. Even in 2025, people have their land stolen. No matter how long it's been in their family, for generations, they can just come in and take it. And I gotta say this part here, ladies and gentlemen. This is why, one of the reasons why I push back on that pull yourself up by your bootstraps theory. This is why I never co-sign that. Number one, everybody don't have boots or straps. Number two, most people do not get out of poverty, despite what people may tell you. They usually point to one person who made it. The majority don't. Poverty is a cycle that is very hard to break. That's just a reality. But number three, even if you do pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you get everything, you get the house, you get the land, at the end of the day, that don't mean anything. Because a corporation can come in and take your shit. This is why I always push back on the corporations and the billionaires, because ultimately they're the ones that are doing the most damage. They said the people in that neighborhood, the median income was $22,000 a year. So it's not like people there are living the Ritz. Think about what it would take for them to have to start over. Share this story with a lot of people, ladies and gentlemen. Pass it on. More people need to talk about this. I know it's not click worthy or whatever, but more people need to talk about this. And then they wonder why people don't want to come out and support and vote for these politicians that are particularly representing their areas, because they're not doing anything. They're not stopping people from losing their land. They're not stopping like these things from happening. They're not improving these communities. So you got to understand why. These are the people that most likely are forgotten about until it's presidential election time. We need your vote. Come out. We need your vote. Where were you when we lost our land? Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat in. It looks like Israel first to me. Gypsy says eminent domain should be outlawed. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Tia says, I'm not surprised they are doing something similar here to landowners in Massachusetts. Yep, I read about that. Robbie says, this is how Black grassroots Americans lost their land stolen. So this is why Latino, Asian, Arab immigrants who come to the U.S. can believe Black folks do not have anything. Thank you for the super sticker, Mo Black Money. Thank you, Cowpoke. If anyone doesn't know what redlining is, this is it. Eminent domain should be illegal, point blank, period. Joanne said eminent domain exists only to destroy any semblance of Black ownership and wealth. Sabby, we don't own a damn thing in this country. No, we don't own any land in this nation. And remember. And thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Black land ownership causes certain groups to get nervous, and land ownership to the U.S. has always meant what land can be taken by force. This is really important, guys. If you can't defend it, you don't deserve to own it. So now you know what the law says. Let's get that comment from Roger on Rockfin. Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Josephine Wright, a Black woman from South Carolina, did not lose her home to eminent domain, but instead won a settlement to keep it in her family. Explanation: Wright fought to keep her family's ancestral home on Hilton Head Island from being taken by developers. The family settled with the developers, Bailey Point Investment LLC, who agreed to build a privacy fence between the family's land. That's good news, because I think I covered that story 2 years ago. And thank you for this one, Roger, and the new construction. Wright died in January 2024 at the age of 94. The family kept the fight going after Wright's death and won the right to keep the land. That's good news. Hopefully, the Smith will be able to win this in court. Hopefully. All right. All right, guys, smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're moving on to the next story. Again, remember the theme tonight is looks can be deceiving. So the past story that we just covered, again, looks can be deceiving because you own the land, but do you really, really own it? And that's similar to going to this next story, because looks are deceiving here as well. President Donald Trump invited Modi. The Modi is the prime minister of India. He's also, of course, India is a part of Brics, just FYI, if you're not aware, to the White House to discuss some type of partnership. At the same time, Donald Trump threatened to put 100% tariffs on Brics nations if they were to move away from the dollar. Now, you know that he's been pressuring them about this earlier on. But the reality is this, folks. In my opinion, these countries have the right to use the currency that they want to use. You really can't point fingers at these countries after you put sanctions on them for years and then say, oh, you still got to use our currency, though. The U.S. has sanctions on Russia. You know what I mean? So Brics is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So Donald Trump right now is trying to take land away from the Black South Africans in South Africa. And then you want to point your finger at these people and say you still have to use our currency. Not a good look. So all this is happening at once. So Modi was here, and guess who goes to the White House to meet Modi? Vivek Ramaswamy and his father-in-law. Now remember, Vivek is not a part of Doge anymore, but he's still all up in this piece. Okay. This is from Modi. Modi tweeted this. I met Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy and his father-in-law in DC. We talked about diverse issues, including innovation, culture, and more. Why is Modi? So you guys need to start asking these questions. Vivek Ramaswamy is no longer part of Doge. He made this very clear himself when he was on the Breakfast Club. Why is Vivek there? Why are you all up in that? So do you see? There's Modi in the middle. There's Vivek. There's his father-in-law. And then there are other pictures here. They're sitting down, meeting and talking with Modi. This just cracks me up. Like, I can't believe this, right? So let me tell you something else that happened. So Donald Trump brought Modi here because he wanted to make some deals with India that mainly favor the US. And one of those deals involves oil. Now I want you to think about something. If you know that you can get oil from another country for a cheaper price, you're more likely to do that. Donald Trump told Modi that you will now only trade oil with the United States. It is cheaper for India to get oil from Russia. Russian oil is cheap. And Modi agreed to it. I kid you not. Again, India is a part of Brics. Listen to this, guys. This is crazy.
Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters. In 2017, my administration revived and reinvigorated the Quad security partnership. And our meeting today, the Prime Minister and I reaffirmed that strong cooperation among the United States, India, Australia, and Japan. And it's crucial, really, to maintaining peace and prosperity, tranquility, even in the Indo-Pacific.
Friends, today we have also set ourselves the target of more than doubling bilateral trade to attain $500 billion by 2030.
$500 billion तक पहुंचाने का.
Our teams will work on concluding very soon a mutually beneficial trade agreement in order to ensure India's energy security.
Now, if you notice, one of the things that Donald Trump said that they will be trading with India or giving to India is weapons. Why are we giving India weapons? Modi, for those who are not aware, is not too kind to the Muslim community. And you have to remember, obviously, everyone in India, does not practice the same religion. So there are some in India that are Muslim, and there are some in India that are Hindu, and maybe some that are agnostic. But Modi is against the Muslim population. This is a big one that people really need to understand. And he's agreeing to give them weapons. What's that all about? Let's continue on.
Trade agreement को
We will focus on trade in oil and gas.
भारत की ऊर्जा सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करने में हम oil तथा gas trade को बल.
So that is happening right now. And another thing that people need to realize as well that I want to bring up, again, don't forget that India is a part of Brics. So India just agreed with Donald Trump to get oil from the United States and no other country, which means they will not be getting oil from Russia. What is that going to do with the relationship between India and Russia? Both of these countries are a part of Brics. Now you have someone that's a part of the Brics nations that has decided to veer off of the course. The point of Brics is to have a multipolar world. Brics is supposed to kind of push back on the West, not rely on the West. And now you have India saying, Modi's like, yeah, we'll do that. So what does that do to Brics? Something else interesting happened during this conversation as well. You got to see this one. Oh, my God. I told you Trump has a tendency to say the quiet part out loud. Here he is. This is Ryan Grimm here. Here he is saying it wasn't our deep state that did regime change in Bangladesh. It was Modi's. So Modi is sitting right next to Donald Trump, right next to him. Watch this.
Say about the Bangladesh issue, because we saw, and it is evident that how the deep state of United States was involved to regime change during the Biden administration. And then Muhammad Yunus made Junior Soros also. So what is your point of view about the Bangladesh?
And what is the role that the deep state played in the situation in Bangladesh?
Well, there was no role for our deep state. It was This is something that the Prime Minister has been working on for a long time and has been worked on for hundreds of years, frankly. I've been reading about it. But I will leave Bangladesh to the Prime Minister.
So do you see what Donald Trump just did? He said that right in front of Modi. So this is another thing I think that some people don't like about Donald Trump is the transparency. Like, of course, I guess, old school Republicans and also old school Democrats and current Democrats as well. They are used to keeping these kind of conversations behind closed doors. But Donald Trump says everything. Like, he has no filter. So he just said it to his face, which I think is fair. Say it. You're going to say it to their face. But he said it to his face and in front of the press. He was like, no, that wasn't us who did that. That was you. So Modi is just like, no pushback or anything there. And I want to show you a little bit more from this discussion because it's just crazy stuff. The tariffs. The other part was Trump threatened to put 100% tariffs on Brics countries who want to move away from the dollar. So I want you to hear this part here. President Trump announces reciprocal tariffs on India while standing next to Modi. Like, I kid you not, guys. Watch this.
Mr. President, you've repeatedly called India a big abuser of trade and said it is really difficult to do business in India because of tariffs. You announced reciprocal tariffs today. I am hoping you can speak about what kind of reciprocal tariffs India can expect. Are you willing to make any concessions? And how can India head off these tariffs? I also have one for the Prime Minister.
Well, India's been, to us, just about the highest tariffed nation anywhere in the world. They've been very strong on tariffs, and I don't blame them necessarily, but it's a different way of doing business. It's very hard to sell into India because they have trade barriers, very strong tariffs. We are right now a reciprocal nation. We are going to, if it's India or if it's somebody else with low tariffs, we're going to have the same. We're going to have whatever India charges, we're charging them. Whatever another country charges, we're charging them. So it's called reciprocal, which I think is a very fair way. We didn't have that. I was going to do that in my other term, and we had the greatest economy ever in the world. There's never been an economy like we had, and then we got hit with COVID. We had to focus on that, and I wasn't really in the mood to be putting it on Italy and Spain and France and India, frankly, and a lot of other countries because the world was very troubled until we got rid of that nightmare. But we had the strongest economy anywhere in the world during that fairly long period of time during my first term, as you know, and we didn't do the tariffs. We would have done the reciprocal tariffs, but we decided, and I decided, I think on a human basis, on a humane basis, not to do them because of the fact that there was such suffering all over the world. The last thing we needed to talk about is trade problems. But now we do. We're doing, we see a tremendous future for our country, but we felt that now it's finally time after 45 or 50 years of abuse that we will do, and this isn't India, this is among a lot of nations. The European Union is very difficult for us, very, very difficult. They tax our companies at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They take advantage of a lot of things, so we're not happy about that. China, of course, is terrible, and we've never taken in 10 cents until I was president. We've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars from China since I've been president in first term and now. And we have to do that just as a mechanism of fairness. And that's what I've done. And so we are being reciprocal with India. Whatever India charges, we charge them. So frankly, it no longer matters to us that much what they charge, because whatever they charge, I had discussions with India in the first term about the fact that their tariffs were very high, and I was unable to get a concession. So we're just going to do it the easy way, and we're just going to say whatever you charge, we charge. And I think that's fair for the people of the United States. And I think it's actually fair for India.
Right in front of his face. Modi is standing right next to him. Modi is standing right next to Donald Trump. Like, and he tells him right there, yeah, we're going to do these tariffs and da-da-da. Again, a lot of transparency there, just right out in the open. And I think that's what some people don't like about Donald Trump. And then there is this statement from Donald Trump. This is all happening in the same week, the same time. This statement from Donald Trump where he says Brics is dead. Like, and I don't understand. Modi's just like chilling. Like what?
Yeah. Mr. President, in the past you have spoken against BRICS. India is part of BRICS. Do you want to dismantle BRICS, or you want to US want to be part?
I don't care, but BRICS was put there for a bad purpose, and most of those people don't want it. They don't even want to talk about it now. They're afraid to talk about it because I told them if they want to play games with the dollar, then they're going to be hit with a 100% tariff the day they mention that they want to do it. And they will come back and say, we beg you not to do this. BRICS is dead since I mentioned that. BRICS died the minute I mentioned that. And I remember when Obama and Biden in particular, I guess he said that, they have us over a barrel. They don't have us over a barrel. We have them over a barrel. If BRICS wants to play games, those countries won't trade with us. We won't trade with them. And if any trading gets through, it'll be 100% tariff at least.
100% tariff. So here's the thing. Let me tell you part of the real reason why they don't want these countries to move away from the dollar. Marco Rubio said the quiet part out loud. And that is because if they decide not to use our currency, we can't sanction them. I mean, again, the number of times that the US government has sanctioned Russia and they still want Russia to say, okay, I'll continue to use your currency. And what these countries are trying to do is they're trying to, again, create a multipolar world where there isn't this dominant figure. They're trying to, I would call it a horizontal organization, similar to, or kind of similar to like what the Black Panthers had. Remember the Black Panthers, like horizontal, like, so, or was supposed to be horizontal, but that's what they want to do. They are tired of being bullied by the US. They are tired of just basically having to cower to what the US wants or they get sanctioned. And maybe these countries wouldn't even be thinking about moving in that direction if we didn't freaking sanction them all the damn time. It's things like that. It's a mess. We'll let them finish here.
You know what? When they hear that, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to say, look what happened to BRICS. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't even want to admit that they were a member of BRICS. That's what's happened.
Yeah. So BRICS is not dead. I don't know what the hell India is doing, but it's not dead. It's not over. But this is just China is a part of BRICS, you guys. And we don't produce much here in the United States. We get a lot of things from China. People need to understand how much we get from Mexico, Canada, China, because we don't produce much here. We sent jobs over to China because of capitalism. Because corporations wanted to be greedy and they said, you know what? We can still produce these products if we get the parts or if the parts are cheaper and we don't have to have as many people work here. So we can lay people off, get cheaper parts and still produce the products. And we'll make more money. We, as in the CEOs, etc. So, I mean, we really ain't got it like that. Like, I'm being honest. We really don't have it like that. So looks can be deceiving because the way that Trump is talking, if you weren't aware of this situation and if you weren't paying as much attention to foreign policy, it might be easy to sit back there and say, oh yeah, I agree with this. This makes sense. Not thinking about the fact that we don't produce much here. So we can pretend like we don't need China, but we do. And that's not China's fault. That's the US fault. Crazy times, guys. I'm telling you, I don't know what it is, but the way that some of these leaders are just cowering to Donald Trump, it is, I don't get it. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on, but I'm curious. I would love to be a fly on that wall to hear what Xi Jinping has to say about this, to hear what Vladimir Putin has to say about this. I'd love to be a fly on that wall. Oh, buddy. Let's go to some of the comments here. Greg, thank you, Gregory Scott. You can't bully the whole neighborhood. Eventually, the neighborhood is going to turn on the bully. Fear-mongering never lasts. It's a good point. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Indian Ocean goes all the way to the east coast of Africa. India has had its own ambitions for a while. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm scared this weapons deal will lead to another ethnic cleansing. Also, your first story made me remember one of my favorite books, Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry. Yeah. Like what? Who is Modi going to use those weapons on? Think about that. Also, keep in mind, this is the same person that refused to give Shama Sawant an emergency visa to go see her mother who is ill in India. Stupid Stuff said, how is Trump still alive? Oh boy. Joe says a lot of countries are lining up to join BRICS. Yeah, this is what happened. They're actually pushing more countries into BRICS. And thank you for the super sticker, Killer Tomato. You guys remember that movie? Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. All right, guys, smash that like button if you haven't done so. And we're moving on to the next story. And again, the theme is looks can be deceiving, and I do not want you to be deceived by this one. So now all of a sudden, Summer Lee and Ayanna Pressley are reintroducing H.R. 40. Now, H.R. 40 is a bill, has been in Congress for quite some time, about the need to study reparations. Again, it is important that I say that, and I'll show you a little bit of that bill in a second. I do not want you to fall for this. I support reparations. I advocate for reparations. Those of you who watch me, you know this. But it is very important that it is done in a certain way because of legality reasons. And it is also important that if you're really trying to make this be a thing, that you would introduce this during a time when you know the Republican Party doesn't all have the House and the Senate. I want to show you what Democrats do. This is why a lot of my anger goes towards the Democratic Party, because they try to play us as fools. The Republicans say things out loud, out in the open. The Democrats, like, they try to pander and do things as if we don't know better. Like, that's what pisses me off. So again, 100% support reparations and advocate for it. But you really need to know what this is about. H.R. 40 is not what you think it is. So here is Ayanna Pressley. Listen to this.
Honor to reintroduce H.R. 40, historic legislation to establish a federal commission to examine the lasting legacy of slavery, to develop reparations proposals for descendants of enslaved Africans. It is an honor to inherit the privilege of carrying this bill forward.
Oh, Lord.
From Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. In my last correspondence with her, she said, keep working on our priorities and never give up. She was the previous House sponsor of H.R. 40 and a true giant in the movement for reparative justice. We are grateful for her leadership. We are grateful for her example and her voice. May she rest in peace and power. And we are grateful to be joined here today by her daughter, former Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, who today, when I thanked her for braving the elements to journey here, said true justice is never convenient. I want to acknowledge some of our partners in good trouble in this fight. Senator Cory Booker, our co-lead in the Senate, Chairwoman Yvette Clarke of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, Congresswoman Latifah Simon, Congresswoman Summer Lee, and the more than 70 members of Congress who have signed on to co-sponsor the legislation that was first introduced. And I want to make this point because it is Black History Month. And while there are those that are working actively, either to erase our history or to whitewash it, that I'm here in this moment to pick up the mantle of this historic legislation that has been championed by John Conyers, Congressman John Conyers, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. That was introduced more than 30 years ago when Congressman John Conyers was a co-founder of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Pause. All right. So we already see some of the issues, right? This has been around for over 30 years. HR 40. And of course, she's like, well, it was brought out through the Congressional Black Caucus. Now I want you to answer this question, okay? The Congressional Black Caucus advocates more for Israel than they do for Black people. I did a whole video about this, right? They urgently jump to advocate for Israel. But this bill has sat in Congress for over 30 years. Why are they bringing it up now? Right? Who's president right now? Who has control of the House? Who has control of the Senate? They know that this is already dead. They're doing it to prove a point. Again, for those just joining, I 100% approve and support reparations. But HR 40 is not reparations. Now, I'll show you that. And it's definitely not cash reparations. This is something that Democrats have a tendency to do. They wait until they are not in power to try to introduce legislation or reintroduce it or push an issue when they know it is not going to pass. But when they have a chance and they have some type of narrow majority, they don't take advantage of that either. I want to take you back to Force the Vote. Never forget, there was a whole Force the Vote town hall, and that ask was for the progressive members of Congress who at that time had a narrow majority, and that includes Ayanna Pressley, by the way, to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker in exchange for a floor vote for Medicare for All. The strategy behind this comes directly from the DSA handbook, Democratic Socialists of America. That when you have a narrow majority, this is what you would do. None of them were willing to come to the town hall, and none of them were willing to withhold for their vote. This was during the pandemic. They weren't willing to put pressure on Nancy Pelosi during a pandemic to give people health care. And the idea was to bring it to a vote so everybody can see who voted against it. And then those people would be primaried and you get them the hell out of there. This, to me, I felt like that strategy made perfect sense. And I didn't even have a show during that time. But I watched all this unfold on YouTube. And I was just like, I can't believe they didn't even try. Didn't even try at all. So it's theater, what you're seeing right now. Ayanna Pressley knows this isn't going to pass. Summer Lee knows this isn't going to pass. Now, let me ask you a question. They can bring this forward knowing that it's not going to pass, it's dead in the water, but they weren't willing to force the vote for Medicare for All, even though they said, well, it's not going to pass back then. Does everybody see this game? I don't want them to deceive you because they end up revealing who they actually are. And by the way, Ayanna Pressley was my representative. I actually voted for Ayanna Pressley her first term. When she ran the first time, I voted for her. She was my representative, so I'm very familiar. And she was a city councilor in Boston before she ran for Congress. She actually did some good things as a city councilor. Once she got into Congress, that was it. They all change when they get in. We'll go on a little bit more here.
We're at a critical inflection point in America, and the moment cannot be more urgent. With Black history under attack and white supremacy emboldened, there is no better time to introduce this bill than during Black History Month, a time when we reflect on our history, our struggle, and our collective power. And I'll say, It is also not only about Black history, but it is about Black futures.
Didn't we have Black History Month last year? Didn't we have Black History Month in 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021? Everybody see what's going on here?
More than 4 centuries ago, Africans were kidnapped, trafficked, and enslaved, forced to build this country under horrific brutality, an economy which we still benefit from today. Rice, sugar, tobacco, cotton. And even after the Civil War, emancipation, and the 13th Amendment, the legacy of slavery endured in other forms, codified in law to deny Black Americans freedom, opportunity, and dignity. And that's what brings us here today. This brutality, these injustices, these horrors were not things just happened within the culture by osmosis. They were legislated. Today, with Donald Trump and Republicans waging their coordinated and at times unlawful assault on Black folks and Black history, we will not allow that history to be erased.
Pause, because she walks into this for me. So I disagree with the removal, obviously, of Black History Month. We wouldn't even have to have a Black History Month if Black history was taught throughout the year in the regular curriculum. And for those who say, oh, it is, don't come for me. I worked in education for over 10 years. No, it's not. Unless you go to a Black school. That being said, it's interesting because I told you this is really about Trump. This is really about Donald Trump. And that's what she said it herself, right? So she said, well, he's doing this and da-da-da-da. Well, let's talk about erasure, right? Because, see, I seem to remember that there was a senator at one point, Joe Biden, who co-wrote the crime bill with racist Strom Thurmond. Joe Biden and Strom Thurmond responsible for taking Black men out of the home, putting harsher penalties on them for drugs. Nobody should go to jail for 20 years for weed. And it's interesting considering how many states now have legalized it. But have they freed those people? Massachusetts hasn't, I can tell you that much. So Ayanna Pressley was totally fine with endorsing sleeping, down and out, can barely function Joe Biden for president. This is when he was still in the race. She was totally fine with endorsing Joe Biden, who co-wrote the crime bill that directly impacted Black communities, primarily Black men. But now she brings up Donald Trump and she said, oh, he's trying to erase Black History Month. Did Donald Trump co-write the crime bill? This is the thing I continue to tell people over and over again. I have my criticisms of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump did not produce legislation that locked up Black men for a long time for things like weed. Joe Biden wrote legislation. So if you have that feeling, Ayanna, towards Donald Trump, you should also have had that feeling towards Joe Biden. But that didn't stop you from endorsing him. You did so because he was a part of your party. So what does that say about the Democratic Party? That you guys were fine with openly embracing Jim Crow crime bill Joe. This is all theater. And I do not want you to be deceived. This is not what you think it is.
We will not allow it to be whitewashed. H.R. 40 is a powerful reminder of the work that remains and offers us a pathway toward truth, reconciliation, and accountability. To be clear, this bill is not a symbolic gesture, but rather a meaningful step toward repairing the deep structural injustices that continue to harm Black communities today. The racial wealth gap in America is not an accident. In Boston, my home city, the Federal Reserve counts Black wealth at just $8, compared to the wealth of white households at $247.
Yeah, I don't know why to flash there, but she's correct about this. This was a study done by Dr. Sandy Darity, who has also been on the show. There is also organizations here in Massachusetts that are actively working to try to get reparations here in Massachusetts. They're trying to do it on the state level. They're doing great work. I think they were just on Tim Black's show earlier today, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. But they're not trying to wait for Congress. They're not trying to wait for the president or anything like that. They're like, no, we are trying to right the harms and the wrongs that were done in this state, right? And I think they learned quite a bit of maybe what not to do or some things to avoid by watching what happened in California. But I think California is also putting forth other efforts. Let's go forward a little bit more.
$1,500. Nationwide, the racial wealth gap is over 10 trillion. That's trillion with a T. This shameful reality is the direct result of generations of precise, intentional policy harm codified into our laws and budgets. And it is specifically the result of slavery and the anti-Black society that followed. From Jim Crow to redlining to mass incarceration, our government, through policies and budgets, has perpetuated and entrenched these harms for generations. The disparities that we see in health outcomes, housing, education, wealth, and more are by design. Today, our government has a moral and legal obligation to right those wrongs, and reparations are a necessary step towards achieving justice. Now, here's what the bill would do. H.R. 40 creates a federal commission, an expert body charged with investigating the enduring impacts of slavery and its aftermath, and developing concrete proposals for reparations.
So we'll stop with her there, and then I'll go to Summer Lee because I wanted you to hear what she said there. H.R. 40 is a study. H.R. 40 is not cash reparations. Now, I told you guys how I feel about these damn studies because the research has already been done. Oftentimes, when you hear a politician say we need to have a study of said issue, these bills go into a corner and they die. Why do you guys think HR 40 has been around for 30 years and nothing has come of it, right? Because it's just supposed to be a study. Now, I'll show you that in just a second, but I do want to go to this part here from Summer Lee. Now, Summer Lee is a newer Congress member. She's from Pennsylvania. I want you to hear what she has to say.
I thank you, of course, to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for carrying on this legacy, and of course to the late Sheila Jackson Lee, who carried this with pride for so long, for her efforts, to the advocates of this movement here and outside. Happy Black History Month. Happy Black Futures Month, in an era, of course, where Black history is attempted to be erased, or whitewashed. The America we know today was built on the brutal enslavement and trafficking of stolen Africans forced to build this country on their literal backs. Despite, however, what Trump and his anti-diversity, anti-equity, anti-inclusion cronies want you to believe, this is American history.
Pause. So do you guys see what this is really about? This is where they lose some of the legitimacy because, again, she's like, despite what Trump has to say, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. When you bring Donald Trump into this conversation, you weaken your argument because then people will just hear, oh, they're just trying to do this despite Donald Trump. There's no reason to even bring him up. Reparations is a debt that is owed. This has nothing to do with him. You come forward with your data, your evidence, 40 acres and a mule, which did not happen. You bring all that to the table and you don't have to mention his name at all. Leave him out of it. People are laughing at Summer Lee and Ayanna Pressley, including people who support reparations, because they're like, oh, look, they're just trying to make this about Donald Trump. It doesn't make any sense. So it looks like they're just trying to be spiteful. Let me continue.
Impact is the American status quo. It's unjust and it is wrong. No matter what anybody says, the history of America is the history of America. Right. And acknowledging that history is not a threat to the present. Would argue that ignoring that history, however, is a threat to our future. No matter how many attempts they make to whitewash this history, the blood of our enslaved Africans ancestors can't be erased from this land. We must acknowledge that. We must acknowledge that the systemic racism that has denied Black folks the ability to thrive and to survive in this nation to this very day. We see it and we feel it every day because the barriers put up in place by our own government, because of redlining, because of predatory lending, because of inequitable funding schemes for our schools are very real. Our government, no matter who is in power, has an obligation to right these wrongs, to provide reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans, to eliminate the racial wealth gap, to uplift the Black community. White supremacy is rampant in this country. Just look at the current administration and our own legislative body. They have contributed to the social and economic harms, to racial terror Black folks have experienced in this country. Now,
there we go again. So she brings up the current administration. Look, we all know what's happening with the current administration, but that's not a claim for reparations. The claim for reparations is the debt that is owed to the descendants of those who were enslaved. And I keep hearing them change these words in and out. 1 minute it's descendants of slaves, and then the next minute it's Black community. And you have to be careful with that, because Black community isn't necessarily those who are the descendants of those who were enslaved. So Summer came in pretty hyper. Look at this current administration. The current administration has nothing to do with the debt that is owed. And this is how you lose. This is how you lose the case for this. Instead of just coming in and making it about what is owed, what was promised, 40 acres and a mule, what was not delivered, you're talking about unpaid labor. We can get into Jim Crow laws. We can get into, she mentioned the redlining. She's correct about that. As long as you focus on that, okay, we get it. We got it. Some people still may not agree with it, but then you can also point to the fact that other groups have received reparations. You can point to the Japanese Americans that were part of the internment camps in the United States that did receive reparations and received cash reparations. You can point to other examples. But bringing up all these other, Donald Trump, his administration, yada, yada, it weakens your argument. This is it pisses me off. And then I want to show you this. Let me show you what HR 40 actually says, because it's not what you guys think it is. We're bringing up the actual bill. HR 40 commission to study and develop reparation proposal for African Americans Act. See, we keep switching out words because you got to be careful here. African Americans or descendants of slavery, freedmen. And the reason why that matters is because, let me bring this down here. The reason why that matters is because reparations is not based on race. It has to be based on status. You cannot say I'm giving everyone who's of African descent in the United States reparations. That would not pass. It would be thrown out in the court by the 14th Amendment. I've tried to stress this to people multiple times. But if you want this to work, you have to do it right. And it has to be able to pass the legal test. So that's important. And you're going to see this here. I'm just going to read the summary. To address the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865, and to establish a commission. So we got these two words: address, commission, study. Okay. You can join organizations right now to study it. Hell, you can go to the library right now and study it. You can talk to Dr. Sandy Darity or read his book, From Here to Equality, to study it. It goes on to say here, and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery, its subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination against African Americans. Here we go with African Americans again. and the impact of these forces on living African Americans to make recommendations to the Congress on appropriate remedies and for other purposes. So first of all, Dr. Sandy Darity has broken down the required, what the cash amount should be, because he did the research. He did this, and not just him alone, but read the book From Here to Equality, okay? Because that actually explains why canceling student loan debt and baby bonds does not close the racial wealth gap. The only way that you close the racial wealth gap is through reparations, right? So this term African Americans, the term needs to be freedmen. This is going to hit all types of, remember the way the judge was able to strike down the student loan cancellation and all that kind of stuff because Biden didn't follow the proper steps the first time? That's what would happen here. Because technically, Elon Musk can say he's an African American. Isn't he from Africa? Doesn't he now live in America? So think about that for a second. So it should say freedmen, but this bill it's a study. It's not, we're going to get this much should be allotted towards, here's the dollar amount, here's da-da-da. It's another study. And they know that. And Ayanna knows that. And Summer kind of knew, so she might be a little in the loop. But Ayanna Pressley knows that. And bringing this up at this point in time, when Republicans have the House and the Senate, you know it's not going to pass. They are doing this for theater. It's a scam. You guys, I do not want people to fall for this. This is not real reparations. This is not cash reparations. I interviewed Ro Khanna a couple of years ago and he mentioned HR 40 and he was like, well, no, it doesn't include cash reparations, but it implements, programs and da-da-da. Man, fuck a program. There's a lot of programs. We got plenty of programs in this country, folks. That does not pay the debt that is owed. Now, when it comes to any other group, they have no problem urgently passing legislation to make sure they get their just due. Am I correct? But when it comes to descendants of slavery, everybody got to drag their feet. And that's because majority of these Congress members do not work for us. White people, they don't work for you either. Majority of these Congress members work for their donors. That's who they work for. And that's why things don't get done. They will rush to urgently pass legislation for Israel. The ADL can come and make demands and say this must be done. Let's rush and urgently pass this legislation. But not when it comes to us, though. When it comes to us, they ain't trying to pass nothing urgently. So Summer Lee and Ayanna Pressley, they know that this is not going to pass. So I say that looks can be deceiving because some people saw this on social media and they were like, oh, wow, they're finally getting reparations going. No, that is not what this is. And they're deceiving people by making them think that it is what it is, and it's not. And they know it's not going to pass. This term, and I'll show it again, African American, this is going to be dead in the water. This is not going to work. So we shall not allow ourselves to be deceived. Not on this show. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Rena said all they do is lie. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, you guys are like fooling people or trying to fool people. Thank you, Ragnon. Hey, Sabs, ever consider interviewing Oren Cass? I saw him on Jon Stewart and thought he was the most articulate voice on right-wing populist economics. I'm not familiar with them, but I can look him up. Charles, The grift will be to blame Trump why we can't get reparations. You won't make Trump the fall guy. Exactly. That's why they're doing it now. Where was this when Biden was in office? Right? Thank you for the super sticker, James Starks. Thank you, Storm. True Dat. Thank you, Troy. Accusing racists and they're the racists themselves. Thank you, Where's the Love? Another nail in the coffin for Dems and the CBC. Clyburn admitted at his fish fry that he had the HR 40 on his desk for decades. CBC is disgusting. Exact. There you go. Tia said, yeah, you didn't learn Black history unless it was February or you had one of those cool Black teachers. Yep. Thank you, Storm. She's using the same old Dem playbook, emotional BS. Thank you, Nas. Trump passed the First Step Act, which was geared to help people incarcerated. He did. Thank you, None of Your Business. They're afraid it will do reparations. Want to preemptively stop that as a possibility. If they did, I think you're saying if it did that, they can claim that they caused it. Roadblock. Thank you. I know myself. Didn't Presley hear Michelle Obama, no affirmative action, wealth creation? Seems like she needs to fight party leadership rather than Trump. That's right. Michelle Obama did mention that during the Democratic National Convention. Thank you. Where's the Love? They had a press conference in a walk-in closet. Thank you, Chris. If these weirdos keep gaslighting, which they will, the amount of reparations should keep going up, just like when California Dems killed their own bill. And thank you, Storm. F a program. Oh, fuck a program. Thank you. All right, let's get the comment from Roger on Rockfin. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you, Roger. How about a law that says if you don't manufacture it here, then you can't sell it on the US market? Someone should introduce how worker cooperatives can be used as a way to guarantee American-made manufacturing to Trump. Interesting, Roger. She said the word African over 6 times. American freedman is the name written into the congressional record. Therefore, government officials, especially Congress members, should be saying freedman like KBJ of SCOTUS used in a case. This got Pan-Africanism written all over it. U.S. Congress members, we are not African-American. If we went to Africa, they'd tell you, brother, you ain't African, you are American. Obama is African-American also. It's a good point. Roger's right, though. Roger knows. Roger knows. All righty, let's go on to the next story here. Everyone go ahead and if you haven't done so, smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share just like a Care Bear. And we're moving on to the next story here, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's time to laugh a little bit. Can we let loose and laugh? Okay. You know, since the Democrats lost the presidential election, it seems like a lot of people are kind of scammering here to try to figure out what needs to be fixed. And that includes some podcasters and even some of those who were former corporate media commentators, like Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo had a couple of suggestions for the Democratic Party. The first one that we're going to dive into is a complete lie. And I'm going to break that down for you. Because Chris Cuomo was out here spreading all types of lies with the first one. So let's go ahead and bring him in because he thinks he has the answer of what the Democratic Party should do. Listen to the first suggestion. This is hilarious.
And I've looked at this through the lens of advertising, and politics and advertising have a lot to do with each other, especially these days. Always have, but certainly these days, even more with social media kind of being a real proxy for a lens on society. Because social media is not really a great echo of mainstream America, but it is what we're focused on. So for better or worse, everything's about the young, the new. Okay, they vote and they voting increasing numbers, which is great. Participation is great any way you look at it. And I was a little surprised, even though I should have seen it coming, that participation would be down in this election. And not just because it was all so depressing. Every election is depressing. But it was that we didn't have a lot of the same mechanisms in place that we did during the pandemic, for better or worse. And you wound up having less turnout as a result because it wasn't as easy as it was during the pandemic to vote. And I do believe that there's something insidious and sinister behind people wanting less ease in voting. Okay.
Pause. First lie. There were mail-in ballots for this election, and there were mail-in ballots during the pandemic. I mean, you had both options. You could go in person or you could do the mail-in ballot. So I don't know what he's talking about when he says it wasn't as easier this time.
Even when it comes to voter ID, the idea that voter ID is going to have more people vote is illogical. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but I understand why people think it's a bad idea. Okay, I really think it's about how it's applied and how you get the people who don't have ID now to get it, and how quickly you can enfranchise people who don't have them based on why they don't have them. And it's not that the reason they don't have them is because they're all illegal aliens. That's not why. But you can't just focus on the young. The 50 plus age group, Gen X, okay, the middle cut of it, is a huge untapped resource in our politics. This is the group of people with the most disposable income. This is the group of people making the most kind of command decisions in our society right now.
For the Gen Xers in the chat, do you believe it's true that you have the most disposable income? Because everyone that I know that's Gen X does not.
These are the most vibrant people in our society right now. Why do I say most vibrant? Because I certainly don't feel vibrant. Dying on the vine here, aging athlete. Well, here's why. I have disposable income. I have savings. I am in a group of people who believe that they're going to have more money in their pocket going forward than they've had in the past. I am someone who buys things. I am someone with kids that I have to make decisions for. I am someone who is a homeowner. I am someone who's a business owner. I am someone with employees. I am a decision maker.
So the first problem is that Chris Cuomo thinks that all Gen Xers are like him. In other words, Chris don't know no broke people. Okay. Chris don't know people that are lower income, people that are poor. So Chris thinks everybody that's Gen X, that's it, the people who he hangs around, he looking around and realize, oh, okay, yeah, we got it like that. He's like, I have this, I have that, I have this. You also worked at CNN and you were paid a lot of money. So a lot of people are not in your situation. A lot of people are not making the type of money or made the type of money that Chris Cuomo made. You also come from a political family. So it's not like Chris was poor.
And Democrats should be focusing on this group of people and what makes sense to them. That should be their lens, not some group of, people desperate for a cause on a college campus. Leave those people to AOC. They'll get her a big following online. Not much else.
Okie doke. So it's time to roast Chris. Because Chris is alluding to the fact that the Democratic Party pays more attention to the younger voters. I heavily disagree with that. Because the younger voters were out in the streets saying, stop the genocide, ceasefire, etc. Kamala Harris didn't want to talk to those people. What are you talking about, Chris? She was going across the country showing off Liz Cheney and talking about Goldman Sachs, making collard greens in a bathtub. She was going around talking about those kind of things. She didn't want to talk to those damn young people. When the young person stood up at the rally in Michigan, Kamala Harris said, I'm speaking. You know what? If you want Donald Trump, keep it up. Otherwise, I'm speaking. What are you talking about, Chris? They never move in the direction of the way that the younger people want. This was a big criticism that a lot of us had, those of us who supported Bernie Sanders, that was a big criticism a lot of us had. They don't listen to the youth vote. They don't move in that way. They don't give a fuck about us. We're not the youth. Well, I'm not as young as they are. They are not the large voting population. It's the boomer voting population. Hell, if they gave a damn about what those activists at the campus wanted, they would have moved in that way. She would have said, I'm going to withhold weapons from Israel. Did she say that? No, she said the exact opposite. If they cared about what young people wanted, don't you think they would have adopted some of those policies that Bernie Sanders had on his platform? They didn't. They don't care about what young people want. So the Democratic Party has not moved in that way. You are either bold-faced lying or you assume that they moved in that way because AOC is very popular. AOC couldn't even win the committee seat. Do I need to remind? AOC didn't win the committee seat, even though she had a lot of support, because Nancy Pelosi went behind her back and told other members of Congress not to vote for her. Young people and the progressive part of the Democratic Party have no leverage within the Democratic Party. Chris Cuomo wants you to believe that they did. They didn't. They never even used the narrow majority when they had it. So Chris is trying to make this about him. So Chris's thing to the Democratic Party is, you guys are paying too much attention to the young people and you're forgetting about the Gen X. No. Let me reframe this, Chris. They ain't paying attention to nobody but those over the age of 65, those who have disposable income, and they are forgetting the people who are young. They're not giving a damn about people who are poor. They're not caring about those groups. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. His advice to the Democratic Party is, don't pay attention to the young people.
Okay? Not much else. The Democratic Party has been focused too much on pleasing people who matter too little in this society.
Did you guys hear that? So according to Chris, he said, you matter too little. The fuck is this? Is this survival of the fittest? You're paying too much attention to the people who matter too little. What? This is Chris Cuomo showing his class. I own a house. I do this. I have that. I have that. You should be paying attention to me, not people who don't have these things. Damn. Didn't I tell you guys to watch out for the people that came from corporate media or got fired from corporate media and said, I'm going on to YouTube and now I'm independent? Didn't I tell you watch out for these people? Because I told you they would still have those same talking points, even though they're supposedly independent. What'd I tell you? They are here to maintain the status quo. Chris Cuomo doesn't want the Democratic Party to pay attention to the young people, to the activists, because that's too far left. Chris Cuomo was there to make you believe that he is independent and independent thinking, but in reality, he is still trying to maintain the status quo and he's trying to keep you there with him. But according to Chris, if you're young, if you're out there, you're an activist, you don't really matter. This is part of the reason why the Democratic Party loses. Woo, buddy.
And look, it'd be great. They vote in a big amount and they're younger people. They'll make their witness. They'll get their mandate and they'll deserve the preference. But right now, it's not there. And
right now, it's not there.
There's a group being ignored that Democrats should be looking at. That's the WHO. Now, within the WHO, it's not just age. It's about socioeconomic type.
Oh, my God. Like, guys, I had to watch this twice, but this is very, very painful for me. You have to understand that. This dude who got mad because someone called him Fredo, threw a fit on camera and threatened to throw the dude down the stairs. He feels like he's not getting enough attention. They're not paying attention to those people. What the hell are you talking about? Kamala Harris and Joe Biden couldn't have ran further to the right. With Liz Cheney, with Goldman Sachs, getting endorsement from Dick Cheney. What the hell is he talking about? Whew.
You have to meet people where they are more. And it's not just billionaires and the broke. Okay? There's a whole cut inside of that Democrats should be looking at. If you think about Democratic rhetoric in the last couple of cycles, it's always the broke, and go after the billionaires, fair share. They don't do it. System's rigged for them. And
false. Now, I'm glad this image is here. There were two people on this debate stage during the Democrat primary who talked about going after the billionaires. And that was Elizabeth Warren, the snake who stabbed Bernie in the back, and Bernie Sanders. None of these other candidates talked about going after the billionaires. Hell, Michael Bloomberg is standing right here on the damn stage and is a billionaire. So I don't know who's editing Chris Cuomo's videos, but I honestly, you can't be this dumb. You really can't be this dumb. So let me tell you what he's trying to say, the other lie. He's saying Democrats only focus on the billionaires or the poor people. Wrong. He's saying they're not focusing on the people in the middle. So he's talking about the people who are middle class or upper middle class. What do Democrats say every time they campaign? We need to build the middle class. We need to expand the middle class. The middle class is in trouble. Haven't I told you guys this over and over? They're always talking about the middle class. They don't mention poor people. They're not talking about poor people. They don't go into poor neighborhoods. They're always talking about building the middle class. They get their money from the billionaires. So what the hell is Chris talking about? Two people on that stage mentioned that, and that was Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. What he's really trying to tell you is that that style of politics, fighting for the poor, the working class, fighting against the billionaires, is a problem for the Democratic Party. So what he's really saying is that people like Bernie Sanders and sometimes Elizabeth Warren, when she not being a snake, he's basically trying to say they're a problem for the Democratic Party. For him to stand there, sit there, and make it seem like the Democratic Party is all on board with getting rid of billionaires and talking about the poor, that is an outright lie. I can't believe this guy. I really can't. I really can't believe this mess, man. Your father was in politics. Your brother was in politics. You were on CNN. You had a great job on CNN and you ruined it because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. You had your hands touching some other woman's ass. That's why you got fired from CNN and you had to go independent. So let's call it what it really is, Chris. So if you feel like you're not getting enough attention, there's something wrong with you. We'll go on a little bit more here, then I'll go to the next part.
The main consideration of people who are thinking that there's a two-tiered system are right in that middle cut that you're ignoring. Those are the people who have real frustrations with the system.
Yeah. So do you see what he's doing? He's trying to tell you that the people who are middle class have real frustrations with the system, when in reality, a lot of people have frustration with the system, but no one has more frustration than people who are poor. Let's move on to the next part. The other thing that he's suggesting that they do is that they need to work on building up some type of presence on social media and YouTube. Listen to this.
Democrats are losing on social media. You know, an interesting aspect of our media culture is the right complaining about censorship, which is a concern. It's certainly a concern for me. While at the same time dominating the places that they say are being censored. Think about it. They're not talking about News Nation censoring. They're talking about the social media platforms. Which voices are the loudest and have the biggest following on social media? It's all righties. And the farther right you go, the more disproportionate their traction is.
That's because the right has more money. And this is the part that he doesn't mention, and people do need to understand this. The right has more money than like left podcasts or pseudo left podcasts or whatever you want to call it. But it's true. That's why if you watch like a Tim Pool, or if you watch like, well, Candace is independent now, but still, she's far ahead of the rest of us. Okay. If you watch like Candace Owens or any of them, notice their studio setup, notice their lighting, notice all these kind of things, right? Where you'll watch someone like me and I'm just sitting in a room in my house, right? Right. Like I don't have, this room isn't mic'd up. That's why I got this mic in front of me, like that type of thing. They have more money. That's why they're able to, and they're not opposed to taking billionaire money. So when you have more money, you're not opposed to taking billionaire money, your name is going to be able to get a lot further. So that's why they're going to get more traction on social media. They're going to get more traction on YouTube. So people have to understand that. Continue here.
Think about it. Just go look at the numbers. These guys who, Benny Johnson or Tim Pool, you don't really know who these guys are. I mean, if you're active in the digital space, you may, but they have huge footprints on here. You've never heard of them in any major outlet. They've never written anything significant. They've never held any positions that are significant. But is there censorship? Yeah. But are people on the right victims? No, they're opportunists and they're doing well on social media. And it's an interesting juxtaposition where they cry about the mainstream media all the time. It's just, all it is a value proposition for them. It's a sell, it's a pitch to give them more attention. And they dominate social media in part because of their victim status.
They dominate because they have the money. When you have the money he don't know what he's talking about. This guy does not know what he's talking about. When you have more money, you're going to get more traction that way. Like there's people, because they have people have to understand, they have influencers, but then there's also marketing companies that help them, etc. Again, they have more money. Jesus Christ.
Very interesting. And Democrats have to get with that and start populating social media with their own people and messaging with their own people. I mean, look, Brian Tyler Cohen, who I love having on, okay? He's got a big following in digital media.
He's also a paid influencer. So see, these are the things that Chris is leaving out. Honey, you're not even on CNN anymore. You can't even get your facts straight. One of the things that I showed you guys a couple of weeks ago was that article that was released by Current Affairs. These people that were paid influencers that didn't announce that, oh yeah, I'm a paid influencer for this campaign or for the Democratic Party. And Brian Tyler Cohen was on that website with those paid influencers. So when the Democratic Party, for example, they have marketing firms and they have consulting groups, right? So there's these marketing firms, these companies, and they hire influencers, right, to get their message across about the Democratic Party. So Brian Tyler Cohen is one of those people. So people have to understand that, right? So he's like, well, that Democrats don't really have anybody big on YouTube. But then he pivots to Brian Tyler Cohen, who is big on YouTube. Brian Tyler Cohen has a big following. David Pakman has a big following. I don't really listen to them, but they have a big following. And David Pakman has been around for years. I remember when he was a progressive, okay? I remember when he was a progressive and he was pro Bernie, and then he changed. I guess he saw there was more money in the other direction, honey. More money to just go along with establishment Democrats. But these two, they have a big following. Jesse Dollemore has a big following. These, these people do exist.
Big, especially for a lefty, who has never worked in politics or government.
And that should tell you something, Chris. If he got that big following that way and he's able to interview Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris and stuff like that, and he never had any position in politics, that right there should tell you something, Chris. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh boy.
None. No pedigree. He's just a regular guy, smart guy, comes from like entertainment world and stuff. He's a
regular guy, but he comes from the entertainment world. The Adventures of Mr. Kid. Oh my God.
I'm not saying that that there should be any kind of gauntlet where, you must have worked in politics. I think it's an advantage. I think it adds heft to you. I think the fact that you've never been part of watching a law get made or even covered it that way as a journalist, and that you've never worked in a campaign, I think there's a sophistication that comes with that makes you have more gravitas than guys who have no idea because they've never been in there. They've never been around a dynamic when there isn't a camera on it, when it's not on the record. But he's doing well. Why? Because those bona fides only exist in the big media or whatever you want to call it. I don't like legacy media. I don't like mainstream media. I don't believe that. I think the mainstream is more present on digital media than...
This dude worked in legacy mainstream media for years, and now he's like, I don't like legacy media. You liked it when you was getting them checks. Okay, wait till he gets to this part here about what they need to do with the media, though.
And it is on all of the well-known outlets. I think these individual brands, these people, are taking advantage of digital media to the disadvantage of Democrats. Where is your Megyn Kelly? Where is your attractive scold who is garnering an audience with a significant chunk of non-political insiders?
Again, this all goes back to money, right? So, like I said, they have more money. So he says that the Democrats need to have a Megyn Kelly. Some people might say that would be Crystal Ball. Some people might say the closest to that might be Crystal Ball. But I think even they don't even take, I've never seen like sponsorships on Breaking Points or anything like that, right? Now, granted, Crystal doesn't do a show by herself, but some would probably say she would be closest to that because she's been around for so long.
Where are they? Where's your Joe Rogan? Where is your zeitgeisty lefty? You got.
So let me tell you where that Joe Rogan is, okay? This is the part that it drives me crazy when people say, I don't know what happened to the Joe Rogan part, but we'll get back to this part. He said, where is your Joe Rogan? Okay. This drives me crazy. When people say, why doesn't the left have a Joe Rogan? The left had a Joe Rogan. His name was Joe Rogan. The left had a Joe Rogan, and there were some leftists or some parts of the left that didn't want Joe Rogan to be a part of it. This is going all the way back to when Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders. Does everybody remember this? When Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders, the left had a Joe Rogan. I don't know what happened to Joe Rogan after that. Do not know. Never met him. Don't know. But the left did have one. Joe moved on to other things. So to sit here and to pretend like the left didn't have a Joe Rogan, that just goes to show you how much Chris Cuomo knows. So Chris Cuomo's tips here, again, you cannot be deceived, right? I do not want you to be deceived here because Chris Cuomo's tips, when I looked at this video at first, at the top, it said Chris Cuomo's top 3 moves for Democrats in 2025. What did I tell you? Looks can be deceiving. When I watched the video, I was like, 2 of the 3 you're wrong on. He didn't even know what he was talking about. So Chris Cuomo is there to make sure that the status quo stays the same and that people who want more of the left policies don't rock the boat. Let's go ahead and go to some of the comments here. The comments are funny. Anonymous says, is Chris going through a midlife crisis? It almost sounds like it, right? Let's go up here. Thank you, Marlon. To qualify for reparations, we should only have to trace our roots back to 1964. That's a good point. Thank you, Kimi. Repeat after us, Chris. You're out of touch. We're out of time. You're out of touch. We're out of time. No, 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 be all right. Hall & Oates for the win. I like Hall & Oates. Thank you, Brown Eyes. I'm tired of the lies. Rachel Maddow stated last night that Elon received $400 million contract from Trump, but it was really Biden. Damn. Thank you, Storm. Sabby spitting truth. Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Don't call her a snake. Snakes only strike for fear or food. It's an insult to snakes. Grifter or astroturf is a better descriptor of or for her. Interesting. Don't call her a comeback. Rick says, because the left are cheap. Storm says, money rules the world. I agree. Shout out to Elizabeth Hansen for becoming a Sabby member. Give Elizabeth a big whoop, whoop. Yeah. In the house. Thank you, Juanita. Chris Cuomo needs to have his YouTube channel taken down and demonetized. So offensive. Well, I don't advocate for censorship or deplatforming. But I think he needs to do some research. Thank you, Andrew. Chris and his midlife crisis mobile can get out of here. Roger, thank you. I said a whole bunch on your Twitter live stream. And the Adventures of Kid Mister. Hall & Oates have classic bops. Yes, they do. A lot of people know Man Eater, right? I think that's probably the most popular one. But there's also that rich girl song. You're a rich girl, though so far. Da, 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 da. Anyway, you can get by on your old man's money. You can get by on your old man's money. You're a rich girl. You guys are going to listen to Hall & Oates after this, aren't you? All right, we're getting to the last. This is the last story, you guys. Yes, this is the last story. It has been a while since I did a deep dive. Last time was Gloria Steinem. I believe before that, I did a deep dive about self-made billionaires, which it's false. It's a myth. It's not a real thing. And I want to continue doing some of these deep dives. So tonight, we are going to do a deep dive into Hakeem Jeffries. And the theme again is looks can be deceiving because Hakeem Jeffries is not who you think he is. And I think you really need to understand where Hakeem actually came from so that you can understand why he's behaving the way that he is now. First, I want to start with this recent discussion that he had here with Jon Stewart. I want you to hear what Hakeem Jeffries says after Jon Stewart basically is complaining that the Democratic Party needs to do more. Listen to this.
Where is the Democrats' Project 2025? Is that underway? Is there everything you're saying feels right to me. The Democrats have to make this point. Where's the infrastructure to do that? And who are the leaders taking charge of that effort? Because when I listened to, I believe his name is Ken Martin, is that correct? The new DNC chair?
That's right.
He kept saying it's a messaging issue, as though, no, everything's going right, you just don't realize it yet. As opposed to, we've gotten away from New Deal values. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think there's a few things going on here.
Yeah.
In terms of how we better communicate with the American people, Maya Angelou said it best. People won't remember what you say. They may not even remember what you do, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And I think what we have to do a better job of is making the American people feel that we understand the pain that they've been in economically for a long period of time.
I actually was able to meet Maya Angelou when I was in high school at a debate tournament. Wonder what Maya Angelou would say if she were alive today. Because I don't think she would apply that same quote when it comes to politics. After hearing that from Hakeem Jeffries, I think it's very clear that Hakeem Jeffries is not a fighter. At least not today. I will go a step further and I will say that Hakeem Jeffries is not a leader, at least not today. I want to go to another one here because we are going through the path here, and I want to show you how he has changed. Recently, it was reported that Hakeem Jeffries is very frustrated with liberal groups pressuring Democratic leadership to do more to oppose Trump. Part of those liberal groups are the activist community. Hakeem Jeffries is apparently, according to this article, tired of it, tired of hearing from them. But that wasn't always the case. You see, Hakeem Jeffries at one point was one of those activist voices. You probably wouldn't know it by the way he behaves now. But he changed to get to where he is. And I think it is important that people understand how Hakeem Jeffries got that seat. So I hope you learned something tonight. We're going to pull up this part here. How big law in Black Brooklyn fueled Hakeem Jeffries' rise. And I want to go to a certain part here in this article. Let's go down here. So I want to show you a picture. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Do you see the guy over here to the right wearing the dashiki? That's Hakeem Jeffries. That's when he was a part of the Black Student Union at Binghamton University, 1992. Hakeem Jeffries in a dashiki. That's because Hakeem Jeffries was raised as a Pan-Africanist. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his uncle. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his father. Raised as a Pan-Africanist. Actually had a pretty powerful voice back then. Pretty powerful voice. He changed. And this is not to say that, people don't change as they get older. They do. But this was a complete 180. Complete 180. Now, I want to show you one part right here that I think is important for people to see. It is about his uncle. The campus at Binghamton University was in uproar. Whispers of outside agitators swirled among the mostly white student body. Security was heightened. The source of friction was the planned appearance of a polarizing Black studies professor who had referred to white people as ICE people and accused, and they said rich, well, you know what we're talking about, of financing the slave trade. Outraged Jewish students demanded the event be canceled. Their Black peers were incensed over the potential censorship. A wedge hard in the middle was Hakeem Jeffries. As a political representative for the Black student group that invited the professor to the upstate New York campus, Mr. Jeffries, a 21-year-old college senior with a flat top and a dashiki, had the delicate task of cooling tensions while holding firm on the invitation. There was also another complication. The speaker, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, was his uncle. So Hakeem Jeffries, at that time, his uncle was invited to speak at Binghamton University, and he made those statements. So his uncle was a Pan-Africanist, and apparently his remarks were not taken lightly. Also at that time, Hakeem Jeffries defended his uncle. Now, his uncle made statements obviously about Zionists, and he also had some views about Israel that you actually hear people talking about today. And we need to ask, like, how this happened. Let me make sure I got the right one. We'll go down. The whole family were Pan-Africanists. So you can see, here's a picture here, a child of Black Brooklyn. There's his dad. There's one of them is Hakeem, the mom, the two sons. Notice they all have on dashikis, right? They were all Pan-Africanists. Here's the part that I want you to hear. It says his mom was a social worker. She traced her roots to Cape Verde, the islands off the west coast of Africa, colonized by the Portuguese. His paternal grandparents moved north during the Great Migration, carrying stories of slavery and lynchings. His father, Marlon Jeffries, was a substance abuse counselor who once ran an unsuccessful campaign for state assembly on a civil rights slate. He and his wife named their elder son Hakeem, which we pull down here, which connotes wisdom in Arabic and West African traditions. Let's fast forward here. Marlon Jeffries shared that emphasis with his brother Leonard. That's what I was just telling you about, who led the Black Studies Department at City College of New York. Professor Jeffries' scholarship pushed the history of Africa and its diaspora towards the center of European-dominated narratives. But in the 1990s, his work began to attract intense backlash among white academics and political figures. And we talked about what Leonard Jeffries said, right? Like Leonard Jeffries made some statements about Jewish people and about Israel. And basically he was given a different perspective that they obviously did not want. Again, some of the things that he said back then, people are saying today after October 7th. So just keep that in mind. So that's Leonard Jeffries right there. Now, listen to this part. Mr. Jeffries, who had long support in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Orthodox Jewish communities, has distanced himself from his uncle's views and at times sought to minimize what he knew about the controversy in the 90s, despite his role defending Dr. Jeffries at Binghamton. So here's the first red flag. Hakeem Jeffries decided to distance himself from his uncle because his uncle was not favorable in the Jewish community because of his remarks and including some of the things he said about Israel. But he defended his uncle when his uncle came to speak at Binghamton University. He defended him. Later on, he decided, I'm going to distance myself from him. Later on, he also, when this was brought up again, when Hakeem Jeffries was questioned about this later on, about what his uncle had said, this was like years later, all of a sudden his answer was, I don't recall. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't recall his uncle speaking at Binghamton University. This was the beginning of the change. Distancing himself from a family member to get the approval of certain organizations. And you'll see this in just a second. So he decided to walk away mainly from his uncle. He went to Midwood High School. I'm very familiar with this. Midwood High School is right next to Brooklyn College. I don't know how the neighborhood was back then, but when I lived there, that was a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. it's a little bit more gentrified now. Like now it's a lot more diverse. So it talks about that. It talks a little bit here about his time at Binghamton, going to that college, etc. And then something else I want to highlight here, because I'm trying to show you a trend. Remember what I told you about the Divine Nine. This is not to shame anybody that was in a Greek organization. I was in a Greek organization, but I noticed a pattern. He was elected president of Kappa Alpha Psi, the historically Black fraternity, and excelled in highly choreographed dance routines known as step shows. Cool. But this is another trend that I've noticed. A lot of the Black congressmen and congresswomen come from Greek societies. I'd say most of them. You think people just got there because they worked hard? No, people are well connected. They're connected before they even run. And I'm going to show you that with Hakeem. That's Kamala Harris. That's Hakeem Jeffries. We can go down the list. I was telling you before about the Black Boule. So they were already connected. And I would say that someone like Hakeem Jeffries was already handpicked. So as someone who had that strong voice back then, was a Pan-Africanist, was speaking out against certain things, this is often the type of person that certain organizations look to bring them into those political positions. They look to the activist groups, and then they take them, they water them down, they give them a suit, and then they donate a lot of money to their campaign. It's not just Hakeem. It's happened with others as well. So when Hakeem decided that he was going to run for office, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more here. This was in 2012, because I want to explain to you how he got his seat. Hakeem Jeffries was running against Charles Barron. Does everybody know who Charles Barron is? Charles Barron was a Black Panther. And I think we all know the beliefs of the Black Panthers. So listen to this. In slightly less than a month leading up to, oh, hold on. I don't know what happened with Rumble. Oh, well, Rumble's having issues. Sorry. In slightly less than a month leading up to the June 26th showdown, Hakeem Jeffries, a state assemblyman at that time, on the national stage raked in $470,000, and just under half of it, 47%, came from out-of-state donors who wanted to block Charles Barron from ascending to Capitol Hill. The city councilman is a fiery former Black Panther with a history of making anti-Semitic rants. Listen to this. Donors came out of the woodwork, with some pitching in from as far away as California, out of fear that Charles Barron would take his anti-Israel invective to Congress. So let me highlight something here. Charles Barron, at that time, was saying what a lot of people are saying today after October 7th. Charles Barron is not anti-Semitic. But do you see what was happening? Charles Barron was running against Hakeem Jeffries. And what you may not realize is that at first, Charles Barron was leading in the polls, a Black Panther leading in the polls. So guess what happens? These groups like AIPAC and other groups like J Street, they came in to pour money into the race so that he would not win. Does that sound familiar? So when you hear about Cori Bush losing her seat because of AIPAC money, when you hear about Jamal Bowman losing his seat because of AIPAC money, I want you to know that even though Hakeem said he thought they should still be in Congress, What Hakeem didn't tell you is that he was a part of this same activity against Charles Barron. He was used to it. He knew about it. He goes on to say, when Jeffries June Hall was broken down further, the percentage of the donors from outside of the city was 60%. It goes on to say here, I've known about his opponent, Charles Barron, for many, many years. Nasty, divisive. I believe he's anti-Semitic. We don't need a guy like that in office. That was coming from Stanley Wasserman of Westchester County. Does this sound familiar? Because Charles Barron was pro-Palestinian. He had solidarity with the Palestinian people, just like Nelson Mandela did, just like Kwame Ture did. So big money from those pro-Israel groups came in and said he cannot win because if he wins, he's not going to vote in favor for the Israel agenda. Does everybody understand that Hakeem Jeffries was not the strong candidate in that race? So when you hear him speak the way that he did to Jon Stewart, he was never the strong candidate. Let's go on a little bit more here. It goes on to say here that Jeffries' camp acknowledged the role of those donors, but noted that his support within the district was close to all inclusive. So everybody need to think about this, how money from the outside came in to stop him and to elevate Hakeem Jeffries. And then there's this one. When all else fails, you go with a smear. So there was a smear used against Charles Barron to make him dip in the polls. And guess who the smear merchant was? It was David Duke. The same trick that was done to Jill Stein in 2024 was done to Charles Barron in 2012. Let's bring this up here. David Duke endorses former Black Panther. I'll take the anti-Zionist any day. Everybody see how this works now? I told you it's a machine. They do the same thing. They don't have new tricks. They've been doing the same thing over and over. So it says, former Grand Wizard of the KKK, David Duke, released a video announcing his endorsement of Charles Barron, an affirmative action supporting African American who is running for Brooklyn's 8th congressional district, and conflicting priorities old Duke faced are just mind-boggling. So what they did, and I think we have a picture of Charles here, or the picture of Charles is further. What they did is that they got David Duke, because I'm not stupid, right? If you get someone like David Duke to endorse that candidate, then obviously people are going to have a pause and they'll say, whoa, if David Duke endorsed him, this is not someone we should be supporting. So all of a sudden he dips down in the polls. They did it to Jill Stein last year. This is why I've continued to say I think David Duke is an op for the Democratic Party. Now, it goes on to say here, Barron's opponent, Hakeem Jeffries, is also African American. So we suppose Duke's racism didn't have to compete against his views on Israel. Barron shares a certain animus for the nation, but then Duke could have just not endorsed. Everybody see this? Wait till I get to the crazier part. So they used someone like David Duke because it said, what could possibly cause David Duke to endorse a Black Panther? Anti-Semitism, of course. So in comes David Duke endorsement, and that puts a hit towards Charles Barron. And then the next thing you know, he's no longer beating Hakeem Jeffries in the polls, and Hakeem Jeffries moves on, surges up in the polls, and that's how Hakeem Jeffries got that seat. And you need to know that. you need to know that the same thing that was done to Jill Stein, part of the same thing that was done to Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, was also done to Hakeem Jeffries' opponent. Now, it gets a little bit crazier because I got to show you this. When Hakeem Jeffries was in college, this is the spooky spook part. He wrote an editorial in 1992. It was February 21st. Silence No More, the Black conservative phenomenon. And Eric, I don't know, can we zoom in on this or does it take it away? We probably can't. I'll just let them know where it is right here. Hopefully you guys can see it a little bit. It's kind of hard to zoom in with this document because this is, no, you can't. Okay. The Black Conservative Phenomenon by Hakeem Jeffries. The only part of this article that I want you to pay attention to, which is crazy as hell. Hakeem Jeffries wrote this, and I wish I could highlight it for you guys, but I can't. Oh, it's old. Tippity top right here. Of course, there is David Duke. While running for governor in Louisiana in 1991, he blamed the state's economic problems on welfare mothers, crack babies, and that radical organization, the NAACP. This is the method of the white conservative. Okay. 1992, Hakeem Jeffries writes an article, The Black Conservative Phenomenon. And one of the people that he mentions in that article is David Duke. Now, call me crazy, but I find it a little bit weird that Hakeem Jeffries talks about David Duke in that 1992 article when he was in college. And then it just so happens that it's David Duke that endorses his opponent, Charles Barron, causing Charles Barron to sink in the polls, which he was ahead, and Hakeem Jeffries gets that seat. Now you put two and two together and let me know. But I find that to be a little bit odd. And there's more. So as we said, Charles Barron lost in 2012. But there's something else that Hakeem did, because he was not done with Charles yet. Charles Barron ran for office again. Now, this was in 2023. This was fairly recent. Or 2021, excuse me, fairly recent. Actually, no. Yeah, I was right, 2023. So it says here, anti-Israel candidate toppled in New York City Council primary. So wait till you see again. Here is Charles Barron. That's Charles Barron right there. And in 2023, he ran again. And I want you to see what happened. Charles Barron, a self-described Black radical socialist who has made incendiary claims about, of course, Israel, conceded to Chris Banks, a Democratic insurgent with backing from organized labor, as well as a powerful congressman. Well, who was that powerful congressman? Because you see, Hakeem didn't go away after that. Hakeem decided to continue to make sure that Charles Barron would not get any political position. And this is what people have to see. Let me make sure I find the here we go. So Banks was who ran against Charles Barron at that point. Banks also received a boost from one of the councilman's longtime enemies, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, whose political director, Andre Richardson, worked on the campaign. Jeffries, who ran against Barron in a contentious 2012 congressional primary, has long supported Banks, who has challenged Barron and his wife, Inez, multiple times over the past decade. In a statement, Jeffries praised the projected winner as a hardworking and committed community leader who represents meaningful generational change in Brooklyn. So, Even after Hakeem Jeffries won that seat against Charles Barron, when Charles Barron decided to run for office again in this council seat against Chris Banks, Hakeem Jeffries joined the likes of Chris Banks to make sure that Charles Barron would not get that seat. Who was he working on behalf of? Hakeem Jeffries wasn't doing that for himself. Who do you think was asking Hakeem Jeffries to make sure that Charles Barron does not get a political seat? At this point, why would you care? You're already in Congress. You already won. No, you had to come all the way back to stop this man from getting any political seat ever. And that is something you need to know about Hakeem Jeffries, because just like he turned his back and said he wanted to distance himself from his uncle, he was willing to try to take down a member of the Black Panther Party in order to appease who? Hakeem Jeffries was willing to take down one of his own in order to appease who? I'll show you. Hakeem Jeffries is one of the Congress members that takes the most money from AIPAC. In fact, Jewish Voices for Peace protested inside Hakeem Jeffries' office. You can see the pictures here. They were asking him to call for a ceasefire. This was Hakeem Jeffries' office. AIPAC funds genocide. Again, this was recent. It says Jews say AIPAC funds genocide. Hakeem Jeffries' office. AIPAC gave $829,835 to Hakeem Jeffries, who opposes a ceasefire. That's another thing. Hakeem was still opposing the ceasefire. There's more. If you look at the FEC filing, this article is dated January 3rd, 2024. I just want to show you something really quick. Who AIPAC was funding and who is getting the most. This is why I say we got to get corporate money out of electoral politics. The second largest recipient in November of AIPAC donations was Hakeem Jeffries, an ally to Israel. Jeffries has rejected the idea of conditioning how Israel can use the $4 billion in aid it receives annually from the U.S., even as the country moved to reform its judiciary system in ways that critics label undemocratic. Jeffries has repeatedly emphasized his support for Israel throughout its military response in Gaza. He went on to say Congress will continue to support in a bipartisan way the state of Israel and Israel's unequivocal right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state always and forever. AIPAC sent Jeffries more than $200,000 in November. That was recent. Hakeem Jeffries was willing to sell out and go after a Black man, not just any Black man, but a Black Panther for AIPAC. He was willing to sell out his own. Isn't that something? The same guy who had on the dashiki, the same guy who was a Pan-Africanist, the same guy was willing to sell out one of his own and fight against one of his own for AIPAC, for Israel. When I tell you a lot of times we don't have no allies, a lot of times we don't have any allies. And sometimes our own people will turn against us and do us dirty just so they can get ahead. Hakeem is one of those people. But Hakeem is not alone. What people have to understand is that Hakeem Jeffries, not only is he not a fighter, he's not a leader. Hakeem Jeffries is a follower. And that's exactly what they want in Congress. They don't want someone who's going to buck the table. They don't want someone who's going to try to fight and stand up for something other than their agenda. They don't want that. They want a yes, sir follower. And that is exactly who Hakeem Jeffries is. So while everyone's upset about his response on Jon Stewart's show, and everyone's upset when he said, what do you want us to do? We're not in power. We can't do anything. You have to understand Hakeem Jeffries was not sent to Congress to fight for you. Hakeem Jeffries was not sent to Congress to fight at all. He was sent there to nod his head and to go along with what the donors want, in particular, Israel and AIPAC, so much that he would do what he did to Charles Barron, which I think is absolutely dirty. So much that he would sit up there and say he doesn't seem to remember his uncle coming to his college and giving that speech. So much that he would say, I'm going to distance myself from my uncle. That is opportunism. That is careerism. But I want to tell you how they get someone like Hakeem Jeffries to begin with. They are going after people who typically are the activists, are the louder voices, are making waves. They're going after those people and they're grabbing a hold of them and telling them you should run for office. You would be great at that. Oh, yeah. And if you support Israel's agenda, we can donate money to you and help your campaign, and you'll go very, very far. The moment Hakeem Jeffries said yes to that, he made an agreement to put black people last and to put Israel first. Don't get it twisted. You got to understand. And he was willing to do it. That's why you don't hear him fight for anything. That's why you don't hear him out there. You never see his ass out there in the streets protesting. He took off the dashiki and put on a suit and got a haircut and went to Congress and says, yes, sir. Meanwhile, people at home are looking at Hakeem Jeffries and they're thinking he's a leader in the black community. Really? What is he doing for the black community? The last time I heard him speak publicly was with Jamal Bowman before all this mess happened, and they were talking about a hip hop holiday. So Hakeem Jeffries is there to give you some type of virtue signal bullshit, but not something that's going to help the black community. That's what he was sent there to do. And while he does it, they will continue to give him more donations and make sure that anybody that tries to primary him does not win. So if Charles Barron was leading in the polls, he was the better candidate and they had to get him out of there. So they smeared him and they used David Duke to do so. And Hakeem Jeffries went along with it because he just wanted the money and the prestige. Hakeem Jeffries is not looking out for you. He is what Dr. West would call a black face in a high place. He will put Israel before you, even if it means he got to ignore you. But he's not alone. This happened with someone else. His name is Van Jones. This is back in the 90s when Van Jones was also an activist. When Van Jones had dreads and t-shirts and said, you got to fight back against the system. When Van Jones wasn't wearing a suit. Before Van Jones got thousands of dollars from Jeff Bezos, they get to the activists, they take you, they corrupt you, and then they own you. And you can never go back to the street after that. Listen to what he said.
Now, if students can do that in 1960, if students can do that in 1970, if students can do that in 1985 and 86, in 1993, when we have the United States government building a death camp, a concentration camp for black people who have done nothing wrong but get sick and want justice. That's all they've done wrong. If we can't close that death camp, if this generation cannot prevent another Japanese American internment in our lifetime, we should all get haircuts and go get regular jobs and give it up.
That was Van Jones saying, if we can't do this, we should all go get haircuts and get regular jobs and put on a suit. And that's exactly what he did. People are selected. The AOCs, the Hakeem Jeffries, the Kamala Harris, the people, the these are people who at some point had some type of activism. They go after these people. The Cory Bookers. They made a deal with the devil a long time ago and they can't get out of that deal. And this is why we have to bring up MCSDS. Eric, can you bring this back up? I got it. When we look at money, corruption, demands, and solution, this applies perfectly to Hakeem Jeffries because that's exactly what the fuck happened to him. Money and corruption. All he sees is dollar signs. Okay? So don't get fooled because he wanted a hip hop day. He not looking out for you. That is not something that's going to uplift the Black community. This is what happened here. Thank you for this, Eric. MCDS, money, corruptions, demands, and solutions. This is something that Eric has been working on and saying that we need to point out with other people. When you look at this, it says this is an easy one. They don't get much more corrupt than Hakeem Jeffries, but let's take a look. Money, corruption, demand, solution. Money. Hakeem Jeffries is awash in APAC money. But beyond that, there's BlackRock, Lockheed Martin, MetLife, real estate, a laundry list of billionaire interests. Where are working class interests? They are nowhere to be found. And this is from Open Secrets, as you can see. So you see what I'm saying? If you follow the money, you'll understand why they're not fighting for you. He's corrupt. And that's what you got to call it what it is. See, corruption. Hakeem Jeffries is the poster child for corruption. He takes it to another level, utterly shameless. And like Kamala Harris, he isn't particularly good at being a politician, but he excels at serving the top 0.1%. And that's what counts in DC. So do we think that Hakeem Jeffries is like this, leader or no? Do we think he's the best interviewer? No. But he's the best at kissing billionaire ass. And sometimes that's all you have to do in Congress. Demands. So what is our demand? In the case of Hakeem Jeffries, it's simple. Resign. Step aside and make way for a new generation of representatives that work for us, the 99%. Solution. But the solution cannot be just to replace the current set of corrupt politicians with a new set of corrupt politicians. The fixes need to be systemic. Get the big money out. Regulate campaign spending and lobbying. Force transparency on the powerful. Transform our government into one that actually serves our interests. Not an easy task, but a necessary one. It starts with clear demands. It ends with mass movement that does not let up until our demands are met. So, and Eric, I think you shared that link with everybody there in the chat. These are the 11 demands. And part of the reason why we have so much corruption is because of number one, big money in politics and government. Almost everything I told you about what happened to Hakeem was because of big money. And of course, self-ambition. And they've become really clever with it. They've become really clever to the point where they sit up there and they say, let's pick someone who's Black. So then the Black voters believe that person is representing them and is going to do things for them. Meanwhile, that Black politician is behind closed doors voting on legislation and agreeing with legislation for Israel. All of your issues half the time aren't even on the table. And if they are, they're pushed to the bottom of the list. But you keep voting for them because they look like you. Hakeem Jeffries is the poster child for corruption. The big one for me is the walking out on family. Because Dr. Leonard Jeffries, like I said, a lot of the things he said are things that people are saying now. And he said, I'm going to distance myself from him because he had political ambitions. And I guess he felt like his uncle's rhetoric would hold him back, even though he had defended him. So now all of a sudden, you don't remember defending nobody. I hope you learned something from this about Hakeem. This was the first deep dive that I did for a politician. The previous one was Gloria Steinem. Before that one was the billionaires, the Resnicks. And before that one was the myth about self-made billionaires. So this is the first one I did about a politician. So Hakeem's corrupt. And he played the game, but he's not the only one. Let's go to some of the, maybe we should do you think we should do call-in, Eric? Do people want to do call-in? I don't know. Do people want to do call-in? Do you guys want to do call-in? I'll just wait to see what people say in the chat. It's really up to you guys. It wouldn't be a long one, but I wasn't sure if people wanted to talk about this one or not. Okay, Eric said we can do. Some people said yes, people do want to do call-in. I see a couple. I also see people saying he sold his soul. Okay, we'll do call-in for about 2 hours ish. Eric, I just need to take a 5-minute break if you want to come on and do the super chats. And then I'll come back and we'll do a quick call-in.
Thank you. Got it. All right. Yeah, one of those quick call-ins. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, we'll do call-in. That'll be fun. We'll see what we all got to say. So I'm jumping in here to we'll give Sabrina a little break before we transit over to the call-in. She'll be creating the room. And yeah, we do it on Zoom. Cameras are optional. And and I just wanted to say also here at the end, check out that that Substack post. Now I'll put it in the chat again. Please do subscribe to 11 Demand Substack. You'll get a occasional posts like that, and we're trying to see what we can get going. One of the reasons why I liked having that at the end of Sabby's deep dive, which is excellent. You can come in to call in and the call in Zoom hangout and tell her so if you like the deep dive. But one of the reasons why I liked having that at the end, what it is also, it doesn't just end with saying, oh, it's terrible, they're all terrible and they're corrupt, and as much as and all that's true, but then we need to say, okay, what are we going to do about it? What's the call to action? What are the potential things? And so, MCDS and 11 Demands tries to address that and we're trying to put out a roadmap and a plan of what we can do. And if you want to see like details of that, you can go to that Substack or go to 11demands.org. It's pretty easy to find. And there's even a strategy in there. The basic concept is, start with clear demands, and then get organized, get together about not settling for less, and making that the core that hopefully brings us all together. And we have the numbers. If we can get it together, we could make something real happen. Anyways, I should be reading some of these super chats and not just droning on and on. Thanks for this super chat, Roger, who's calling back. This was a little earlier. Asking Sabby, how does she know Hall & Oates? Because that's Gen X and Boomer, saying she's too young. And also, of course, thanks. Big shout out to Roger for being the genesis and providing a lot of the links in the info on that deep dive. Big shout out to Roger, who I'm sure will be in the Zoom hangout, call and chat, whatever we call it. And we'll be giving you the link to that shortly. And thanks for this one, Lee. Who says, thank you for bringing us the real stories and for spending Valentine's with us, Sabrina. You're the best. And thanks for this one, Focus, who says, how dare his uncle speak the truth? Sad that Hakeem did that. And I mean, I put in the chat, man, the Hakeem is cold. That is cold, cold. And thanks for this one, Roger. He says, Van Jones of New York, baby. Thanks for the super chat, Courtney Smith. Your deep dive segments deserve a theme jingle. Oh, we'll have to think about that one. A deep dive song. And thanks for this one. Where's the love? Hakeem pulled the same stunt on his uncle the way the Obamas pulled a stunt on Reverend Wright. All about those lobbyists, Benjamin's baby, shaking my head. Yeah, you know, I thought of Obama and the Reverend Wright stuff as well. You know, they'll play in that lane to, you know, as long as it suits them, and then once the money says you change lanes, change tracks, they change. And thanks, Roger, who says, Sab, Colonel Barron, friends for 40 years. You got to get him on. Yeah, Barron, who was in the story there. Yeah, if you got any connections, Roger, or, you know, if we have that connection, let's work on getting him on. And thanks very much for this very generous super sticker, Edwin Rodriguez. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. And thanks for this super chat, Unemployed Scholar. Charles Barron did have the seat for a while and kept the developers out of his district, which is 90% Black and also brown. And thanks for this one, Helpful Harm. They get politicians from the fraternities because they only recruit followers who crave approval from abusers. Roman soldier breaking became Greek life. Yeah, there's that whole, you know, connections thing that's in, you know, you think of like the big club, right? And, you know, they get into all those things, and it's about making the connections and then going from there. And then those connections become part of the whole systemic corruption that they all hang together. And thanks also for this super chat, Edwin Rodriguez. Thank you. Who says, please do more of these political corruption segments. Yep. Well, we're definitely, you know, into talking about political corruption and doing something about it on this channel. And thanks for that. And thanks for the super sticker, Clarissa Palmore. And also, and all one same, echoing, yeah, more corruption deep dives, please. Yes, we will work on that. Yes, we'll be getting the Zoom room hooked up here. And like I said, please do join up to the 11 Man Substack and see what comes down the pike, you know. And I'm looking, you know, trying to make connections and try to get more of that stuff going. And it's always back here. It's actually conveniently right here, ready to show, you know, the 11 demands, you know, and the idea is to have this be kind of the core principles, you know, of a movement that can really get somewhere, because it's about these demands, these principles. And so it's not about focusing on personalities or people, you know. You see how that gets us with people like Bernie and so forth. It's about focusing on, you know, these demands which call out core principles. And it's it can be a handy score sheet too, when you see a politician out there, score them on your demands, whether they're these demands or others, and see how they fare. And if they don't meet your demands, don't vote with them, don't support them.
That's right. All right. We are going over to call-in. Let me go ahead and open it. The link is pinned at the top of the chat. I'll go ahead and open it so people can get into the room. And all I ask is that when you join, just make sure your mic is muted. If you want to speak, at the bottom of the screen, there's an option to raise your hand, and that's how I know that you want to talk. And also, you can find the link to that if you come in a little bit later or you're behind the stream at sabbysabs2.com. You'll also find that link for the call-in and the passcode as well. But it looks like people don't need the passcode. They've already been able to join. So yeah, it won't be a long call-in, but I figured you guys might want to talk a little bit about this stuff. So we can do that.
And I'm
Other than
just
that,
setting up the Sabby Sabs link right now.
Thank you.
It'll be updated shortly.
Awesome. Great.
Some logistics.
All right, guys. I will see you over at Call In. Again, it won't be a long call in, but I'll see you over there. Again, if you come in a little bit later, sabbysabs2.com. Talk to you then. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.